Welcome back to another episode of the Grinds My Gear solo series. My name is Ashton, and I'm glad to have you back in here today. One of the things we're going to talk about today is sport-specific training. What is that? Is it a real thing? Will it make you better at your sport? There's a lot of schools of thought on this. There's a lot of research that's put out on there. But as a coach and as someone who's producing athletes that are competing at a higher level, I thought, this would be a good podcast and a discussion to have and to help guide some of the younger athletes, guide some of the people, just regular people who are looking to get better athletic performance in their craft, in their sport. And they're thinking about including weightlifting, strength and conditioning, all that kind of stuff into their programs, into their lives. And there's a big thing. There's two schools of thoughts on this topic. So I wanted to kind of dive into it where I am as a coach and as a almost former athlete, pretty much retired, but not really. But where I stand on it as a coach and as an athlete, and how I do it with our athletes and the successes that we've had, and that I've had, and then others that I know have had with strength and conditioning, incorporating into their athletic regimen. Now, I'm going to come from it from the martial arts perspective. I'm only going to do about half an hour on here on this because I don't want to ramble on too long. It's just me on this. So I should be able to hammer this out in that time and not bore you. But I'm going to come at it from the martial arts perspective, and I'm also coming at it from American football perspective because they're two sports I'm really, really familiar with. And I'll try to touch on it with other aspects of other sports, but people will get the idea once I kind of expand on it. Now, let's just dive right into it. What is sport-specific training, and is it real? And the reason I decided to do this podcast today is because I actually had this conversation with some of my students last night as they were asking me about strength and conditioning. So a little bit of background on me is that before I opened up my academy, that's exclusively what I was doing. Even though I had all these high pedigrees in martial arts and instruction for martial arts, I spent a lot of my time working with people one-on-one, giving them what they needed for either sport or what they needed for injury recovery. I spent about 10 years doing that. And then I started transitioning into full-time Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, MMA coaching because that's my passion. But that doesn't mean that I don't have a good foundation for that kind of stuff too. Another reason I spent a lot of time, Another reason I spent a lot of time learning in that field is because myself as a mixed martial art athlete have had so many injuries. Some are my own doing, some are just dumb luck, some are just genetic, right? We have to call it like it is. Sometimes genetics does play a factor in injuries. And so because of that, I had to spend a lot of time doing strength and conditioning work. I had to spend a lot of time rehabilitating, more than I spent on the actual mats, which sucks, but that's the hard reality of just being an athlete and anything, right? Injuries happen and you're going to have to rehab and get back in there, or you end up quitting. Right, so that's where the expertise comes from. All those years and years and years and years of work in the gym and in rehabilitation from injuries, culminated into what my knowledge is now. There's a reason. Like for example, at my academy, one of my good clients, I've been training him for years. He's I think 71, 72 now, retired, avid golfer. He's retired and he wants to get better at golf, and we've got him tremendously better at golf. And I'll explain how in a second. But we've got him tremendously better at golf. One of the things he's always said is, why don't you put your kid degree up on the wall? On the wall I have my degree, my black belt certificate, outlining that I'm a certified black belt and I've achieved that ranking. And I don't have my university one up there. And I do that because a lot of the knowledge that you get for strength and conditioning doesn't happen in a textbook. It straight up doesn't. Unless you're a doctor and MD doing certain things in that field in a clinical setting where you're diving deep inside tissue, you're doing cuts, you're doing minor procedures, that kind of thing. Most of the best people in the industry are people who are fitness enthusiasts and have been under the bar. They put themselves under the bar, they strength and condition the crap out of themselves. They have some athletic background, and they're able to put together programs that are really beneficial for their clients and for their students, and get them to another level. Now, that being said, let's backtrack a little bit more. The reason I don't put my degree up there is because all my knowledge was based upon in here and on the mats. Very little knowledge is book knowledge. And that's where we dive into our topic today, is sports-specific training. Sports-specific training to me is just a gimmick. It's a word that people put together to sell you training programs, sell you their gyms, sell you that kind of stuff, to make you think that, oh, if I go here, I'm going to get better at my sport. And what I'm going to say might piss off some people in that industry, and I don't give a damn. Anyway, I'm here to cause controversy, not stop it, is you're just lying to people. A lot of the time, people who are pushing sport-specific training, quote, sport-specific training, are people who didn't even excel at a sport themselves. They're just good at working out. And so they understand basic lifts, basic kind of things. And here's the thing. If you do basic lifts and you get stronger, you're going to have better force output for sport regardless. Sport-specific training to me is just lingo that people use to drag you in, to lure. It's like the hook. They throw the hook, they got you in, and now they make the sale. How do we differentiate? Holy crap, I screwed that word up really bad. How do we differentiate between that and what's actually gets you better at sport, right? And so when I look at it, I was trained by Coach PK Mills. He's strength conditioning coach out in, I think his place is out in Mississauga now. He's bounced around for the last few years, but he's set up shop in Mississauga, and he's a Canadian powerlifting champion. He was my strength coach for almost over 10 years since I started. A lot of my strength and conditioning foundations and knowledge comes from working with him. So it didn't came from a textbook, like I said. It came from being coached by another coach. Taking the principles that he's applied and using them for myself, and it's worked. I'm incredibly strong. Now, I have a lot of injuries, like I said, because of different kind of things. Overuse, I'm a chronic abuser in my body. Also, too, genetics plays a factor into it. And those are the two big things of saying why I've incurred more injuries. I think the first one, chronic abuser, is definitely the number one thing that's held me back. And then genetics obviously has to play a factor in there. Overall, though, strength and conditioning, that's never been an issue. It's just been those other issues. Is I just push myself too much, and then, God's given you a certain body and certain limitations. You have to know and learn to operate within them. And if you don't, there's going to be problems. And so now we get into sport specific. How do you get better at sport using strength and conditioning methods? All right. And so when I'm looking at an athlete, when I have a blank slate, like I have quite a few blank slates at my academy right now. And what I say by that is people who are great athletes, good potential, could be great professional athletes, could achieve high level things, but they are fresh, so to speak. They don't have, and you can tell. We recently started our academy strength and conditioning class, and you can tell you have a great athlete, but you don't have someone who has body mechanics down properly. And you can tell that by something as simple as a kettlebell swing. It's done so incorrectly. All over the place. You can look at online, it pisses me off. Sometimes I'll watch online videos of people doing kettlebell swings, teaching kettlebell swings, and they're teaching a squat. It's not a squat, it's a hip hinge movement. And you can tell the limitations of a person by simply giving them an exercise like that. Even if you describe it really well, you can tell the limitations that person has. And you'd be surprised how many athletes cannot do kettlebell swings. It's crazy. They don't understand the hip hinge part as opposed to the squat. Right? And so I tend to base it off. You have great athletes, but then you have these mechanics that they don't have. And what I try to tell our athletes is when you're in the weight room, you have to think about the function of the weight room. What I mean by that is, if you're a basketball player, if you're in my profession here, a mixed martial artist, a martial artist, if you're a football player, if you're a soccer player, your job is not to lift the heaviest weight. Your job is to perform the best on the field, on the mats, in the arena, wherever. Those are skill-based things. Sports are skill-based things, right? Let's go back to our main topic here so I can relate it better. Martial arts is a skill-based thing, right? You can be a very strong person, and that is a great attribute to have. It will get you out of a lot of things. But at the end of the day, we've seen it time and time and time again. The person with the more skill, almost 99% of the time, wins. Not maybe 95% of the time. Strength does play a factor, but a very little factor, right? The person who can exhibit the more skills always wins, right? So you want to be able to spend more of your time on the mats getting those skills than in the weight room building that muscle. Now, there's a catch there, but we're going to get to it. It's no different than hitting a baseball. Let's take a baseball. It's a fine-tuned athletic movement. If you are busy in the weight room lifting weights and not hitting baseballs, you're never going to fucking hit a home run. You're never going to get on base, and which makes you a useless baseball player, right? So you have to remember, sports are skill-based, not strength-based. Strength has a component, but it's not the end-all, be-all. You need to keep that in mind, that if you want to be elite at your sport, you need to spend more time on the skills than anything else. Secondly, comes strength and conditioning. And I notice I say strength and conditioning and not sport-specific training, because you've been sold this notion that you can mimic a fucking action in the weight room. I beg to ask you, what action can you mimic from martial arts in the weight room? What are you going to throw a fucking ankle weight on and throw kicks? That's stupid. What are you going to do, punch with weights? I see a lot of people do that, punching with heavy weights. Well, you're just learning to punch slow. When I'm looking at training somebody, well, we use 1 pound weights here, 2 pound weights to do shadow boxing and those kind of things. Those aren't impactful. Those aren't going to slow you down. Those are going to make you faster. I see people picking up 10 pound weights and trying to punch, and what the fuck are you trying to do? You're moving something slower. You're just going to be a slower puncher. You can't learn to punch technically in the weight room. You learn to punch technically in and on the mats, right? So are there movements that can help you? Absolutely. There's certain movements that you can do in the weight room that will overall help your performance. But what I boil it down to is the big three, right? You need to do 3 things really, 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 really well at the fundamental level. So whether you're in your 20s, 30s, doesn't matter. If you're starting out and you're just becoming an athlete and you realize you have a skill-based thing, a skill-based sport that you're really good on, and now you're like, well, I need to add strength and conditioning. I'm getting banged up. I'm going against higher level guys who are physically stronger, physically faster, physically whatever more. I need to step up a little bit in the other aspect. And that's how you have to look at it. Because here's the thing. For things like martial arts, there's no off seasons. So you don't get a time where you get to sit back, relax, and lift weights, right? Most other sports have off seasons. You play for a certain time of the year, then you get an off season. I'm in a sport where there's no off seasons. You're training constantly. And hence why there's a high risk of injury in competition for martial artists, wrestlers, etc. But you're training constantly, and you should be training constantly at your skill-based sport. You shouldn't be coming out of a season and not playing anymore. You should be coming out of a season and doing it in an aspect that is a lot lighter impact, but it can still help you build those skills, right? And so when I'm looking at how do I fundamentally start building something in a weight room to translate onto the mats, onto the field, we look at the big 3. The squat, the deadlift, and the press, right? And when I say press, I don't mean bench press. I mean chest press, pressing in general, pressing movements, right? Squatting, I don't mean back squat in general. I mean squatting in general, being able to go down, being able to go up, having a good range of motion, and being efficient. Deadlift, I don't mean picking up a heavy ass bar. I mean being efficient and going from the ground up, holding weight ground up. Now there are some, pause for a second. All right, so there are some things when you're looking at all these different lifts, there's variations and there's all these kind of different things. And so, but you want to be efficient in these 3 lifts. That should be your first goal as an athlete. When you're looking at strength and conditioning, can you press? Can you squat? Can you deadlift? And like I said, it doesn't mean picking up heavy shit. It means being efficient at those movements. Because I'll bring it back to martial arts. When in the hell am I picking someone up over my head, on my back, and squatting them down 10 times? Never. I need to be strong in certain positions. I'm never doing that. When am I deadlifting weight? Never. People will argue, well, you pick people up in wrestling. No, I high crotch them. I use leverage and hips to get them up higher. The best guys in the world are good at that. Now, you break that movement down even further and you're seeing the squat, the deadlift, and some pressing motions. So you need to be efficient and strong in those motions. You don't need to be a bodybuilder. I think that's where people get kind of twisted. Now, it obviously depends on your size, weight class, all of those kind of things, how much you should be lifting. But the general rule of thumb is you should be able to do your body weight in each 3 of those lifts. I generally don't agree with the pressing body weight. I'm not a big pressing movement person. I like a lot of pulling motions because I'm an anterior chain person, so I have a big chest, but I don't push 225 hard. I just can't. I've had a pec surgery and it doesn't interest me. It doesn't make me better at what I do by bench pressing. I'll use dumbbells and a dumbbell press and be efficient at that. But it's not a big lift. Squatting wise, I haven't squatted over 210 pounds for years. Reason being, as an athlete my entire life, I have disc issues. Every time I put the bar on my back, the next day I'm sore, my back is hurting. Even though my technique is good, it compresses the discs. It's not worth it. And then we look at deadlifts, same thing. Because of the disc issues in my back, there's a little bit of mobility problems. Using a traditional bar for a deadlift from the ground has given me issues, so I have to modify it to make myself better and still get those movements in and maintain those movements as I age and continue on in my athletic journey in life. Right? So what are our goals? Our goals are to be more athletic on the mats, on the field, on that, and use strength and conditioning to complement those with a strong body. Now, what they'll sell you is you got to do all the sport-specific training. And mind you, we can have a good 2-hour podcast about all the intricacies of this. But what we're going to go on is the fundamental stage. What do you need to do in the fundamental stages of your weightlifting and strength and conditioning journey to get better? And it's to practice those movements, the squatting, the deadlifting, and the pressing. Now, one of the bigger things you got to look at, as I just mentioned, am I posterior chain or am I anterior chain? And how can you tell? You can normally tell that simply by genetics. You can normally tell that simply by looking at somebody and seeing their musculature makeup. Where do you carry most of your weights? For me, for example, I carry most. I don't even have to try for chest. I do some push-ups, I do some sit-ups, I do some dumbbell presses. My chest is nice and big. I don't really work my arms, and my quads are naturally just really, really, really big. So that means I just have to spend a lot of time on my posterior chain, right? And some people, it could be the opposite. They have really strong hamstrings, really strong glutes, really strong back muscles, but they lack on the push department. So that's the variable that you have to see, and you have to have some analyze, because sometimes it might not be the big 3 for you. Might not be push, squat, deadlift. It might be pull, squat, deadlift, right? Because you might be an anterior chain person, so you need to do the pushes, or you might be a posterior chain person who needs more posterior chain work, so you might have to work a lot on the pulls, right? So let's break those movements down into different variations of why, and then in further podcasts, we will go into more depth about sport-specific training and what you should do to help mimic actions from your sport. Like, for example, what we're going to talk about now is modifications to lifts that I've made over the years to keep me in sport. Okay. So while I have had a lot of injuries and stuff, I'm still doing it. That's the thing that you need to take away from a lot of the people who are out there is who's still doing it, who's still not, right? I'm going to be 36 years old. I'm still actively doing my sport, not as competitive as I wanted to be. And I don't really care about that anymore. I care about more of the just being able to going into my 40s, going into my 50s, still being able to participate in sports, still being able to do it recreationally, and being able to carry that all the way into my 70s, 80s, where, things are going to get more just general fitness oriented. But when you're in your prime, in your 20s and your teens, you're looking to get as fast and explosive and as crazy as possible in your sport as fast as possible. And it's simply by building those fundamentals, being strong in those areas. Now, you see a lot of videos, especially in football, these guys in the weight room destroying the weights, and kudos to them. They're big, they're strong. American football is another animal in terms of strength, right? There is a certain degree of strength you need simply just to walk onto the field, and compete at the combine and compete in certain high school programs out there. It's another animal, right? But I beg to differ the question to now. Am I trying to be a champion in the weight room, or am I trying to be a champion on the field? So I tell my students all the time. I told them this example last night. There was one day a few years ago where I was at my coach's gym. He has a full weight room there, and I put the headphones in. I'm jacked up, and I'm pressing. People are walking by saying, "Later, Ashton, later, Ashton." I'm like, "Peace," and I'm fucking lifting. Great workout. Was pumping weights like nothing. It was a great day. Felt great, looked great, did great. Woke up the next day sore as fuck. Okay? Now, for the average person who is just looking to get fitter, healthier, great. That's a great day. To me, that was a failure on my part because the next day I couldn't do my martial arts training. I was too sore. And when you're too sore and there's those microfibers anywhere, that's where you risk the injury. That's where you risk, holy shit, my pec is this sore. I could barely do this because I did so many presses. And if I reach out for somebody and a single leg or something like that and they carry my arm, it's going to pop off, right? Those are things that people need to realize. When you're lifting for sport, especially if you have a sport that's consistent, where you're competing consistently, right? Some athletes have, like, for example, for hockey, they have regular season, then summer leagues. Same with baseball, same with basketball. Sports have advanced that far. If you're constantly in competition, you can't be killing yourself in the weight room and putting yourself in compromising positions where you're having all these micro tears from all these great workouts, and then you're going into sport and it's not going to help you at that point in time. In fact, it's going to probably get you freaking hurt, right? So you need to manage the load when you're in the weight room, right? If you want to be a great athlete, I think complementing what I tell my guys is 2 times a week. So you're in the training room 5-6 days a week, and you're complementing that with 2 days of strength and conditioning work. We have a strength and conditioning class here, so I tell them just do that. You're good to go. It's a 35-minute class. We do basics, fundamentals, make sure they have kettlebell movements down, and then do more and more on your own. And that will help you get stronger and maintain you can spend all the time on the mats that you want, and you're still going to maintain your body weight. You're still going to maintain your mass. You're still going to get stronger. You're not going to break down. And when it's time, when you get to another level and strength is a bigger component, then we add more, right? And then we add certain cycles after a fight. We spend time building, and you get what I'm saying. But for the most part, if you're killing yourself in the weight room, you can't train the next day. And I'm not saying weight train. I'm saying go on the field and do your sport specific thing at a high level. You've killed yourself in the weight room. All right. And that's why I said earlier on the podcast that you don't want to always put the bar on your back. You don't want to always lift a heavy deadlift. You don't want to always bench press. Those movements are not conducive to sport performance, but the actions are. So I'm going to give you another example. Something that I do a lot of is variations of these activities. And it's something I'm going to do in a second because I'm about to work out. I'm drinking my nice little pre-workout here. I'm about to go get a nice little workout in before I have to teach in the evening. Okay, so let's look at the squat, for example. Back squat. Is it a great exercise? Of course. You can't find a person on the planet who's going to talk shit about the back squat. Now, you have people like me who have back issues, disc issues, certain things. When I'm doing the back squat, it compresses the disc. I'm sore the next day. My mobility is limited. And that's not ideal for a guy who loves jiu-jitsu. I want my back to be loose and as mobile as it can be all the time, right? So I look at a squat activity. Something like a squat, I will back squat once in a while. When I say once in a while, I say once a month. Once a month, I back squat to make sure that my neurons, my back, my brain, everything remembers the motion to put weight on my back and squat. Will I squat heavy? Absolutely not. The most I do at this point is 150, 160, so that I know that's my weight range where my back feels good the next day, right? If you don't have back issues, great. You can put a little bit more on the bar. But what I would say is if you're looking to be athletic and for athletic performance, you operate at about 50 to 60% of your max. So you can hammer out 8 to 10 reps, not be sore, not be tired. It's a maintenance lift you can maintain, right? That way you're not going to get into the gym the next day and you're going to be super sore. Your legs are going to be super sore. You can't throw kicks. You can't run. You can't do your footwork drills. Then it wasn't worth it. Right? So I always operate at 50, 60%. Sometimes people will say, hey, you're so big, you're not lifting that much. Well, I'm not trying to lift that much. I'm trying to be efficient. I'm trying to keep these movements active in my life and to keep my muscles strong and prime, but I'm not trying to be a bodybuilder or a weightlifting champion. I'm trying to be a good athlete. So another thing I do with the squat is I vary the squat. So what I do when I vary the squat is, like, for example, I will do a lot of goblet squats. I love goblet squats. I love front loading my quads. I do a lot of goblet squats. I'll do back squats. I'll do split squats. So the Bulgarian split squats where you put your foot on the bench and the single leg split squat, I'll do a lot of those. Those are one of my favorite activities to do, favorite exercises. So I take about 5 or 6 different variations of squats, and I include them in my regimen. So I'm not always putting weight on my back. I'm not always attacking one set of leg muscle. I'm still maintaining that movement, that squat movement, in a bunch of variations that suit me best that can allow me to sport perform the next day. Right? Now I'll look at a deadlift. Let's look at a deadlift. Deadlift, picking the bar off up the floor. It seems simple. It's very complicated. You got to drive. You got to use a lot of legs. And the same thing. The weight's coming down on the squat. You're picking the weight up on the deadlift. What do I need to do different for the deadlift? So for somebody like me, I found it a big problem. I used to get a lot of back issues from picking the bar up. Some of you might have good hip mobility, good deadlift technique. My technique is, I wouldn't say A1. It's not steak sauce. It's up in the 80% top. Problem is, picking the weight off the floor hurts my back. So there's different variations I use to get the same effect without the soreness, without the excess weight, and getting that work done. So things I would use instead is I use rack pulls. So I eliminate the ground phase and just the up phase of the glute squeezing, glute activation phase in the deadlift. I love doing rack pulls. Another variation we use, and I love using it, is the hex bar deadlift. I find that helps with my back a lot. When I load that thing up, certainly do have a little bit of disc issues the next day, but it's nothing compared to if I'm using the bar with the mixed or neutral grip deadlift. Another thing, I like to use kettlebells. So I go wide-legged sumo deadlifts with kettlebells, kickstand deadlifts as well, and single leg Romanian deadlifts. Those are all great options to use in your weight training regimen to offset picking up a heavy bar every single time. Because picking up the heavy bar every single time is not going to make you a better athlete in there. It's going to make you overall stronger, but using the different variations I just mentioned will help you excel. Now we're going to go into the last one, the push-pull. Okay, let's make this simple. All right, pushing weight away, pulling weight towards you. Okay, the pull motion to me is more important than the push. Pulls are quite easy. They're quite simple. They're rows, and rowing and rowing and rowing and row your boat. Single arm rows, dumbbell rows, barbell rows, rowing machines, cable rows, all kinds of rows where you're pulling and you're contracting and bringing those things together. Those are great activities. One that I really like are TRX rows. Suspend the feet. Those are great. Inverted rows, pulling yourself up. Those are all great activities. What I find with the rows is, yes, you get exhausted. Yes, your back will start hurting a little bit. Not when I say hurting, I mean like hurting in a good way. You feel that burn. It doesn't compromise you superiorly the next day. The back can and has the ability to recover. Where I find the best development is for those variations of rows. Using barbells, using dumbbells, using those variations of those rows to get their body weight rows, so those inverted rows, those TRX things. Those are also great if you are planning to do sport the same day or the next day. You want to use those kind of rows. They're not going to overly exhaust your muscle. They're going to help you keep that movement. The posterior chain is very important. So I say row all the time. Do one at least. If you're getting in the weight room as you're an athlete, do one row activity a day in the weight room. It's very important. Push, not as important, in my opinion. There are certain activities in the push. Yeah, it's effective, depending on what sport you play. Like if you're an NFL player, yeah, push is very important because if you're a lineman and you can't push people, then you're fucking useless, right? You're not going to make jack shit and you're going to be kicked out of the league in 2 minutes. But if you are a soccer player, push is not an important movement. Not. In fact, having a heavy push might actually make you a slower athlete, right? You carry too much muscle up top, you're going to be slower on the bottom. So it really depends on your sport and the mechanisms involved in your sport. Now, that being said, there's tons of guys I know who play professional football who don't have the strongest push, right? They just have the strongest lockout. They work on different phases of that push. So, for example, when you think about an alignment push, if the person's in close to you, yes, that push is important. But most of the time, if you're able to lock the arms up and hold them there, that is key phase. So those are isometric holds. So isometric holds are a lot more important in those kind of sports than they are in the whole pushing motion. So you want to maybe, if you're working in those aspects, you want to work on maybe isometrics, so holding people in certain positions. Right? I look at a sport like jiu-jitsu. This is my expertise. Jiu-jitsu is a lot of isometric holding. So then why, I beg to ask you a question, why are we pumping out reps? Right? One of the things I was showing my students the other day is if you want to get a better, stronger triangle, at the end of practice, get one of the slam balls, put it in your triangle, put it in your rear naked choke, put a timer on your phone, and squeeze for 30 seconds. Those activities are going to make you stronger at those kind of things. Like, for example, one of the movements I use to help with my isometric holds, especially my arms, because when you're doing jiu-jitsu, MMA, yeah, we got strong biceps from holding gable grip and all that kind of stuff, is Zercher squats. So you're squatting with the bar out here. That's why I like goblet squats so much, because I actually get that movement where I'm holding weight here. That's what I do in jiu-jitsu. Everything's in this range. Why am I doing weights out here? Why am I doing cable flies? Why am I doing cable rows. I don't do any of these movements. When I'm boxing, everything's in here. Everything's in tight. So why am I doing movements out here? Yes, I'll do movements out here to maintain that joint movement once in a while. But movements out here aren't making me stronger. Movements in here are making me stronger. So I use the Zercher squat, and you get a really great bicep pump from something like that. You get that goblet, you're holding the isometric holds, holding on to the balls and squeezing them, working on your submissions there. Gable grips, holding a ball in here, doing a farmer's walk like that. So something I do with my Muay Thai athletes, especially in the clinch, I'll have them use gable grips, this on a big 40-pound ball, and they'll hold it in tight to them. And they'll do a round of boxing, for example. They'll do a round on the pads. And as soon as the bell rings, I make them pick up that ball, hold it, isometric squeeze. That's the squeeze that they're going to use in the sport. Not doing all sorts of fancy shit in the weight room. That's the squeeze they're going to use in the sport, and that's the squeeze that I want to develop. So that's sport-specific training to me. Using different methods and different modalities in the weight room to achieve a specific result of movement. Is it life-changing? No. Is it something I sell as a package and say sport-specific training? No, I don't sell that. What I sell is, hey, you're going to have to do good at these 3 lifts, build a foundation, and once you've built a foundation, we add variations to these lifts to help maintain it and make it more specific to your activity. So if you can kind of piece together what we've talked about for the last 30 minutes, is our strength and conditioning foundation should be built off of those 3 lifts, and then we throw in variations of those lifts to help complement the activity that you're doing. So for example, to finish off this podcast and give you a great idea, and we'll expand on it more, if I have somebody who's a football player and they're a lineman, I'm going to be working heavily on the squat, heavily on the lunge. I'm going to work the push and pull positions because the lineman needs to be able to push, if they're pulling, they're getting a penalty, but that's besides the point. They need to be able to pull. Those are heavy movements, right? When you look at how they line up, one foot in front of the other, it's a staggered squat. So you might look at something like kickstand deadlifts, might be a really great option for that. Using those push movements to help locking people out. Now you take the same athlete from the same team. Let's say football player, wide receiver. I will not train him the same way. In fact, I would train him the opposite way. Now you have freaks at wide receiver, absolutely gigantic, like a DK Metcalf, absolute beast. But would I train him the same way that I train the offensive lineman? Hell no. DK, does he have to push? He does have to block. But the block is an isometric inside hold. I'm not going to spend too much time doing presses with DK. I'm going to spend a lot of time working on his legs, his mobility, his ability to shift direction, his ability to explode off the line from that lunge running stance, explode off that line. Is upper body strength important? Sure, a little bit. But what's actually more important for a wide receiver is upper body mobility. The ability to catch in a radius and get both hands over, one hand over, grip strength, those kind of things. So you look at a wide receiver, you might put a program for a wide receiver in there where they're doing a lot of grip strength work, a lot of core work, because they need to be vertical. They need to expand their body. They need to get wide. They need to do things like that. You won't be doing the same thing as offensive lineman. And that being said, too, what I would say is this is another variation as a strength coach that I would do for wide receivers, defensive backs in sports like football, where they're constantly jumping and falling. I would throw in some judo and some jiu-jitsu training. Not a lot, because you don't want them to get hurt, but that aspect of falling, they need to know how to fall and reduce risks of injury. And so that's something that they can replicate in the weight room using break falls, different kind of things to help maximize their ability to stay on the field, right? And that's sport-specific training, right? So taking those fundamental 3 lifts and giving them variations for each athlete. So instead of, for that wide receiver, instead of working heavily on the bench press, I will work heavily on overhead movements, and overhead movements that keep them mobile within that long range of motion. So they can be a 360-degree maniac. If you remember Calvin Johnson, he was a wide receiver for the freaking Lions. Remember, statistically, they said he has the catch radius of a 2-car garage. That's freaking insane. That's insane, and that's what you want. Whereas you look at the offensive lineman, you want everything in here to be strong. You want those pushes to be strong. Whereas a wide receiver, their job is to catch the ball. Yes, they got to block. Yes, they got to be physical. Their job is to catch the ball. So I want everything overhead to be absolutely terrifying, and I want everything on the ground to be fast and lightning quick. Right? So you would train those athletes 2 different ways, but you would use the same fundamental 3 in different variations for that athlete. Right? So boiling it down again, one more time before we wrap this up, is if you want to be strong and really good at sports to start off, what we want to work on is our fundamental 3 activities: squat, deadlift, and press push. Right? When you start figuring out what skill set you are good at, what skill set you want to replicate on the mats, on the field, on there, you start variations of those activities once you've built a foundation, and then you continue those variations in season, out of season, building those variations of those lifts. So for example, something I like to use a lot, my feet are never parallel, so why do I back squat all the time? I like doing split squats. That's where I am. I'm in a lunge a lot of the times when I'm wrestling, when I'm doing all those kind of things. That's where I want to be strong at. So I build a foundation in a squat, and then I start doing split squats, different kind of things. Same concept with my deadlifts. I never am with my feet parallel deadlifting. I'm always in some sort of, lunge position. So kickstand deadlifts are great for me, and they work great for my hips. Kettlebell swings, kettlebell variations, those are what helps me really. Pushing, I'm not in a pushing position that much. I'm in a lot of framework. I hold here to frame people away, push people away. I'm never pushing like that. So that's not a motion I train a lot. So I do a lot of things that are in here strength-wise. Pull, push in here, planking, holding my body weight. When I'm in terms of pulling, it's a small pull. So I do a lot of pulls myself to maintain my posterior chain. But that's what I'm looking for. So, and to wrap up this episode, that's what we're trying to get good at. The big 3. Get good at the big 3. And then start implementing variations of the big 3 that are more specific to the actions that you do in your sport. And that way, you're not getting sore because you're replicating movements and positions that you're always in. So my body is not getting sore from a lunge because I'm always in a lunge when I'm doing jiu-jitsu. So when I do extra lunges with weights, it's not taxing on my body at all. There are tears in the fibers, yes, but they will recover a lot faster because my body's used to being in those positions. And that's how I tend to train our athletes and the success that we've had so far. And that's how I've trained all my my recreational clients as well. Right, so I'm going to wrap this episode up here. We're going to talk more about that later. That's just the first of many. So if you have any questions, don't be afraid to put them in the comment sections. Reach on out, and we can help you out and give you some advice. I'm never opposed to that. Or if you have any questions that we can address in another podcast, that'd be great. Put it out there. Let me know, and then we'll talk about that as well. This has been another episode of the Grind Train Gears podcast, talking about the big 3 lifts today and how to get yourself better on the mats, on the field, on the ice, on wherever, by implementing simple strategies in the weight room. I hope you had a great time. Take care. Peace out. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It means a lot. Take care. Have a great day. Bye-bye.